Hi guys, today we are going to find out, what if Earth had two suns? You step outside this morning, coffee in hand, expecting the familiar golden glow of sunrise. Instead, you're greeted by twin orbs blazing across the horizon in spectacular tandem. The sky erupts in colors you've never seen, orange bleeding into violet, crimson dancing with gold. Your shadow splits in two directions, creating an eerie X pattern on the ground beneath your feet. The temperature jumps 15 degrees in minutes as dual stellar radiation bombards your planet. You squint against the overwhelming brightness, realizing your simple morning routine just became impossible. Birds fall silent, confused by this cosmic anomaly that shouldn't exist according to everything they know. Your smartphone's camera can't even capture this bizarre spectacle. It simply overexposes into white noise. You probably won't survive the next few months if this becomes permanent, but let's explore anyway. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Drop a comment with your location and local time. I'm curious how this imaginary scenario would affect you. Now, sit back and let's dive into today's alternate journey together. Within hours, you notice the atmosphere itself seems to be having a panic attack. Winds that should flow predictably from east to west now spiral in chaotic, unpredictable patterns. The dual heating creates massive thermal columns that twist into mini tornadoes across your neighborhood. You watch your neighbor's fence bend and sway as competing air currents battle overhead. Temperature gradients become extreme. One side of your house bakes while the other remains oddly cool. Weather forecasters throw up their hands in defeat as their models simply can't process this. Storm systems that normally take days to develop now explode into existence within hours. You witness clouds forming and dissipating rapidly, like time-lapse photography in real life. The jet stream, Earth's atmospheric highway, fragments into multiple competing rivers of air. Rain falls in bizarre patterns. Heavy downpours followed immediately by scorching heat that creates instant steam. Your local meteorologist quits on live television, declaring the weather cosmically broken. Ice caps begin their accelerated melt as dual solar radiation overwhelms polar cooling systems. Ocean temperatures spike unpredictably, creating massive evaporation that feeds these atmospheric monsters. You realize that your planet's delicate climate balance, maintained for millions of years, crumbles in days. Your morning jog takes you past farmland that's transforming before your eyes into something unrecognizable. Wheat fields that should be golden and ready for harvest now appear scorched on one end, flourishing on another. You notice farmers standing bewildered in their fields, staring at crops growing at impossible speeds. Some plants, overwhelmed by constant dual radiation, simply wither and die within hours of exposure. Others, particularly heat-loving species, explode into unprecedented growth spurts that defy agricultural science. Tomato vines stretch across entire acres in days, producing fruit so rapidly they split from internal pressure. Corn stalks shoot up like bamboo, reaching heights that would normally take months to achieve. You watch agricultural workers scramble to harvest crops that ripen faster than human hands can pick. Greenhouses become death traps as internal temperatures soar beyond what any cooling system can manage. Root vegetables cook themselves in the superheated soil, turning gardens into accidental underground ovens. Dairy cows huddle under every available shade, their milk production dropping to zero from heat stress. Irrigation systems work overtime but can't keep pace with the accelerated evaporation rates. You realize that humanity's food security, built on predictable growing seasons, faces complete collapse. Global food prices spike as traditional agricultural zones become uninhabitable for conventional farming. Your first night under two suns becomes a surreal experience that redefines what darkness means. You lie in bed at what should be midnight, but orange light still streams through your blackout curtains. Your circadian rhythm, evolved over millions of years, simply can't process this perpetual twilight existence. Melatonin production drops to nearly zero as your brain receives constant signals that it's daytime. You find yourself wide awake at 3 a.m., feeling simultaneously exhausted and hyper-alert. Sleep medications fly off pharmacy shelves as entire populations struggle with chronic insomnia. Children become particularly affected, their developing sleep cycles thrown into complete chaos. You notice your co-workers arriving at the office with dark circles under their eyes, looking zombified. Coffee sales skyrocket globally as humanity desperately seeks artificial energy to combat sleep deprivation. Night shift workers paradoxically find themselves in the best position, already adapted to irregular schedules. You experiment with sleeping masks, white noise machines, anything to trick your body into rest. Dreams, when they finally come, become vivid and bizarre as your REM cycles fragment unpredictably. Mental health services report unprecedented demand as sleep disorders trigger anxiety and depression epidemics. You realize that the simple act of sleeping, once automatic, now requires conscious effort and planning. You stand on the beach watching the ocean behave like it's having an existential crisis. Tidal patterns that once followed predictable lunar cycles now fluctuate wildly under dual gravitational influences. Massive waves crash against shores that haven't seen such fury in recorded history. The Gulf Stream, that mighty oceanic conveyor belt, begins stuttering and reversing direction sporadically. You witness coastal cities flooding during what should be low tide periods. Ocean temperatures spike unevenly, creating thermal layers that disrupt marine ecosystems entirely. Deep-sea currents, Earth's hidden circulatory system, fragment into chaotic eddies and whirlpools. Fish populations migrate frantically, following temperature gradients that change daily rather than seasonally. You watch fishing boats return empty-handed as traditional fishing grounds become barren overnight. Coral reefs begin their final bleaching process, unable to adapt to rapidly fluctuating water temperatures. Antarctic ice sheets calve massive bergs at unprecedented rates, flooding coastal regions globally. Hurricanes form in locations where they've never existed, powered by these new thermal dynamics. You realize that ocean currents, the planet's climate regulator, no longer regulate anything predictably. Coastal real estate becomes worthless as sea levels rise and fall unpredictably throughout each day. You wake to the sound of birds singing at completely wrong times, their internal compasses utterly scrambled. Migrating species abandon their ancient flight paths, creating chaotic aerial traffic jams across continents. Polar bears, evolved for Arctic conditions, begin an unprecedented southern migration seeking cooler territories. You observe desert animals emerging during what used to be scorching midday hours, now seeking dual sun warmth. Nocturnal creatures face an existential dilemma as true darkness becomes a rare commodity. Bats cluster in caves during daylight hours, but venture out into perpetual twilight completely disoriented. Flowering plants bloom continuously, exhausting themselves trying to follow multiple solar cues simultaneously. You witness entire ecosystems collapsing as predator-prey relationships lose their timing synchronization. Hibernating animals wake prematurely, confused by extended daylight signals that override seasonal instincts. Marine mammals beach themselves more frequently, their sonar navigation systems disrupted by thermal ocean layers. Insect populations explode in some regions while vanishing entirely in others, disrupting pollination cycles globally. You watch zookeepers struggle to maintain feeding schedules as animals lose all sense of natural rhythm. Evolution kicks into overdrive mode as species either rapidly adapt or face immediate extinction pressures. Darwin himself would be amazed at the accelerated natural selection occurring before your eyes. You check your electricity bill and discover it's tripled as air conditioning systems work around the clock. Solar panels, ironically, begin overheating and shutting down from excessive dual sun exposure during peak hours. The electrical grid strains under unprecedented demand as entire populations seek refuge in climate-controlled spaces. You witness rolling blackouts becoming routine as power companies struggle to meet cooling demands. Wind turbines spin faster than ever, generating massive amounts of clean energy from the chaotic weather patterns. Hydroelectric dams face dual challenges: drought from evaporation and flooding from ice melt simultaneously. You notice neighbors installing emergency generators as electrical infrastructure begins failing systematically. Data centers, those invisible pillars of modern civilization, relocate underground to escape the heat. Nuclear power plants require constant cooling, pushing their safety margins to unprecedented limits. You realize that humanity's energy infrastructure, designed for predictable conditions, faces complete reorganization. Geothermal energy suddenly becomes the most stable power source as surface conditions remain chaotic. Electric vehicle batteries drain faster in extreme heat, leaving drivers stranded with dead cars. You watch smart cities become not so smart as their climate-dependent systems fail en masse. Energy storage becomes the new gold rush as societies desperately seek ways to hoard power for cooling. You notice your normally cheerful neighbor has become irritable and withdrawn after weeks of constant daylight. Seasonal affective disorder transforms into something unprecedented as darkness becomes a rare luxury commodity. Mental health professionals report a surge in cases of light-induced anxiety and perpetual alertness syndrome. You find yourself craving actual nighttime with an intensity that surprises your own psyche. Children's behavior patterns shift dramatically as their natural energy cycles lose all regulatory cues. Sleep deprivation clinics spring up everywhere, offering artificial darkness chambers for desperate insomniacs. You witness relationships straining as couples struggle with synchronized exhaustion and irritability. Workplace productivity plummets as employees arrive increasingly disoriented and emotionally unstable. Meditation and mindfulness practices evolve to help people cope with perpetual environmental stimulation. You observe religious communities adapting prayer schedules as traditional dawn and dusk disappear. Suicide rates spike globally as human psychology fails to adapt to this fundamental environmental change. Social gatherings move underground literally as people seek dark spaces for psychological relief. You realize that human civilization's rhythms, built around natural light cycles, face complete reconstruction. Artists and creative types either flourish in constant inspiration or burn out from overstimulation entirely. You attempt to plan your vacation and realize that traditional seasons no longer exist in any meaningful way. Calendar makers face an existential crisis as spring, summer, autumn, and winter become obsolete concepts. Schools struggle to maintain academic schedules when semester systems based on seasonal changes collapse entirely. You watch agricultural festivals being canceled worldwide as harvest times become completely unpredictable. Sports leagues scramble to adapt as outdoor activities become impossible during peak dual radiation hours. Fashion industries pivot dramatically as winter clothing becomes irrelevant in most global regions. You notice people creating personal microschedules based on local heat patterns rather than traditional time. Religious holidays tied to solstices and equinoxes lose their astronomical significance completely. Tourism industries collapse as traditional seasonal destinations become year-round climate nightmares or paradises. You observe communities developing entirely new cultural rituals around artificial cooling periods. Insurance companies refuse to cover acts of dual suns as weather-related claims skyrocket exponentially. Wedding planners become meteorological experts, timing ceremonies around brief temperature lulls. You realize that humanity must invent completely new temporal frameworks for organizing civilization. Children born into this world will never understand what winter is coming actually meant. You stand in your backyard 5 years later, watching humanity's remarkable adaptation to our binary star reality. Cities have transformed into underground networks connected by cooling tunnels and climate-controlled walkways. You observe children who've never known traditional seasons playing games based on heat wave patterns instead. Agriculture has revolutionized through vertical farming and genetically modified crops designed for dual sun exposure. Your smartphone now displays solar intensity forecasts instead of traditional weather predictions. New professions emerge: circadian rhythm consultants, dual sun safety inspectors, and climate refuge architects. You witness humanity developing enhanced tolerance to light exposure through both technology and gradual adaptation. Space agencies accelerate terraforming research, viewing Earth's transformation as preparation for multi-star planetary colonization. Ocean cities rise from the waves as coastal populations embrace floating communities with advanced cooling systems. You realize that human ingenuity has once again triumphed over seemingly impossible environmental challenges. Religious movements interpret the dual suns as either divine blessing or cosmic warning signs. Artists create entirely new forms of light-based sculptures and architecture, celebrating perpetual illumination. You watch as Earth slowly stabilizes into new ecological equilibrium patterns around twin stellar influences. Humanity prepares for the next cosmic surprise, having learned that adaptation defines survival. You reflect on how this incredible journey began with simple morning coffee and evolved into civilization's greatest transformation. The species that once feared the dark now cherishes brief moments of twilight as precious gifts. Children born under two suns will someday tell their own children stories about the mythical time when Earth had only one. Your planet hasn't just survived this cosmic anomaly, it has fundamentally evolved alongside it. Every challenge that seemed insurmountable became an opportunity for unprecedented innovation and adaptation. The dual suns that initially threatened to destroy everything instead forged humanity into something more resilient and resourceful. Climate refugees became climate pioneers, creating new societies perfectly suited to this transformed world. You understand now that catastrophic change doesn't always mean catastrophic endings. Sometimes the universe forces evolution at a pace that reveals just how remarkably adaptable life can be. Earth continues its ancient dance through space, now choreographed by two stellar partners instead of one. The story of humanity under twin suns proves that survival isn't just about enduring change. It's about embracing transformation. What do you think would be the most difficult aspect of adapting to life under two suns? The physical challenges like sleep disruption and climate chaos? Or the psychological adjustment of losing familiar natural rhythms that have guided human civilization for millennia?